faint.
Yeah, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yep, I turned the volume up. Thank you.
Great.
That's from Dan.
Hi, Andrew. Are you able, can you please host the closed session?
I'm sorry, Adrian, what was that?
Can I, oh, hold on. Let me just transfer. Can I transfer the hosting of the closed session to you?
Oh, yes. Can I host? Yes.
Yes, awesome. Thank you.
Adrian, looks like Elisa Marquez is in.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Okay. We have a form?
Okay. Let's get started then. Good morning, everyone. Call this regular meeting of the AVA Executive Board to order. And Adrian, can we please get a roll call?
Great, thank you. Dublin? Oakland? Alameda County?
Present.
Pleasanton?
Present.
Albany?
Present.
We have a form.
That we'll move to open public comment. This is for items not on our regular agenda. I do not see any members of the public here in the room. Do we have any online who would like to speak? Please raise your hands.
Yes. We have two hands raised. Local Clean Energy Alliance. You're allowed to for 2 minutes, 3 minutes? 2 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Hi, this is Jessica Tovar, Local Clean Energy Alliance, East Bay Clean Power Alliance. And I just wanted to encourage the board not to vote in favor of PG&E's nuclear energy for various reasons. But one of the things that I want to highlight is that you're actually considering a decision on something that has not been clarified on like what the offer is. In doing research on the issue, there has not been an advice letter issued by PG&E, and all your numbers are based on assumptions of what might be offered. And so that really shows that this is like a premature decision. And so the board should not be making any decision until there's full disclosure on what the offer is from PG&E. And certainly considering there's always strings attached to something that comes from PG&E to community choice, as community choice is its competition. So I wanted to emphasize that and just really highlight this is actually a rush to voting for something that could be harmful in the long run. More so, it really is going to affect the marketing of this agency when the whole point of this agency and all community choice programs was to offer cleaner energy. And certainly this agency needs to get back on track and actually implement its local development business plan roadmap to actually actualize the benefits that we need in the territory that you serve. Clean power to the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dan Schoenholtz, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my name's Dan Schoenholtz. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Fremont. I was just responding to the initial question. Somebody was asking if there was anybody from the public here. So I just wanted to let you know that I'm here, and my colleague Alan McCauley, I think, is either on or will be on later. And we're just tracking the Renewable 100 item on your agenda. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there no further hands raised at this time?
Great. Thank you for your comments. We are going to rearrange the agenda just a little bit to take account of some scheduling that we have to do. So we are going to move item 7 and 8, that's the closed session public comment, and our closed session item up and take those first before we get to the rest of our agenda. So now I will open item 7, that is closed session public comment. Do we have any attendees online who wish to speak on this item?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Great, then we will go to item 8, which is our closed session. We will return and report out on any action items there and then take up the rest of our agenda.
Do we have a different link for closed session?
I will send you the link to the closed session.
Okay, thank you so much.
Adrian, should I just mute this here?
That way, huh?
All right, Adrian, we're all good?
Yes.
Okay, thank you everyone, for waiting for us. We are back from closed session and there is no reportable action. With that, we'll move to item 3, which is our approval of our minutes from our last meeting on May 1st. So hopefully Member Marquez is rejoining. But we'll give her a second.
We still have quorum.
We do still have quorum. I'm assuming she has no issues with the minutes. Double check. While we're waiting for that, any public comment on the approval of the minutes? Item 3.
Are there no hands raised at this time?
I'll move the item. Second.
Was moved and seconded. Adrian, could you please call the roll?
Great, thank you. Dublin, Oakland,
Aye.
Alameda County, Pleasanton,
Aye.
Albany.
Aye.
Minutes are approved.
Thank you. With that, we will move to item 4, which is our draft 2024-2025 budget. We please have staff report.
Absolutely. All right. If you can pull up that presentation, Adrian, I'll jump right into things. Being mindful of time, I'll try to move quickly, but this item is a pretty meaty update. As a quick reminder, we did review our initial draft budget in May to Execcom, FAP, as well as the full board, moving towards what we thought was going to be a smooth process. And there was an error filing at the end of May, which is an updated forecast of PG&E rates for 2025. It was a very meaningful change. And so this budget now incorporates those meaningful changes. The good news is it brings down our energy rates as a reflection of some softer energy prices. It does sort of compress some of the headroom that we operate with. And as a result of that, we've made some changes in the recommendations to value proposition and such. So we'll walk through those details, of course. If you can jump to slide 3, Adrian. That's really the headline of this, and just a little bit more commentary on what's driving that. So you can go to the next slide, Adrian. Slide 4. Great. So, many of these slides are the same, but I will of course highlight the key changes that we're presenting here. The big key change here is the 2025 bar in the bottom left chart. We previously had that bigger, and basically as a reflection of 2024 January through April of meaningfully softer energy prices. There's an overcollection in 2024 that results in 2025 rates going down and PCIA going up. The good news for that is, from an affordability perspective, these are lower rates for our customers. But as you can see, in terms of our cost of service green line, that of course just compresses our sort of financial budget surplus as a result of that. And so we'll talk through some of those changes a little bit more. I think what's important to just point out is when you look at rates and sort of our operating budget year to year, sometimes it's best to look at across multiple years because there's a balancing effect that happens because basically 2024 rates were set at a certain level, energy prices are softer. So we'll see that 2024, this current fiscal year that we're in, overperforms. And as a result of that 2025, we're going to make somewhat of an adjustment there where we're going to, as of right now, we have a lower budget surplus than we had previously presented in the May draft budget. Adrian, you can go to the next slide. This is really an overall summary of all the changes that we made, and then we'll go into some of those changes in a little more detail in the following slides, kind of really hitting on a few of these points. So obviously I touched on the energy resource recovery account. That's the error filing. That is a standard process that the IOUs have where they're filing their projected rates to the CPUC. They did that at the end of May, so it was ironically immediately following our draft budget presentation. And then we anticipate that we'll do another filing towards the end of the year in the October-November timeframe. That is the standard process. So obviously ahead of going into calendar year 2025, we will see what that actually kind of firms up to be. So the latest forecast is a reduction of those rates. We will see how costs actualize throughout 2024 to know if that continues to be the case. It could be higher, it could be lower. All indications for summer are natural gas prices are extremely low, historically low levels. Pretty good snowpack, so there is some indication that we'll see continued softer price in the summer, but much of that is weather dependent. So we'll see if heat waves come and we'll see what happens in the markets. It's possible that rates will be different at the end of the year, of course. So this is just the latest forecast. The three big changes I'll highlight are we had previously recommended a 7% discount on the value proposition. We are maintaining that at a 5% discount, which is our current level. We had previously recommended a $50 Carefera bill credit. We have removed that, but we'll speak to some of the sort of neutralizing effects of the lower rates and how that compares. And then, of course, there's some meaningful changes to the forecasted net position and therefore allocation to reserves. And then we're somewhat creative on the waterfall to the extent there is a greater budget surplus and sort of how that flows through that we'll present. And those are really the three big changes on the budget. Everything else in terms of the carbon-free energy targets, the local development budget, other sort of staffing requests, that has been maintained. So those are the three big changes. The bottom right chart, let me just walk through that really quickly. So what we try to do is lay out 24 and 25 rates, PCIA, and specifically the changes that we saw between May and June. Quick footnote is where we have noted things as 2024 versus 2025. These are full calendar year average rates across customer segments, but also average seasonally. So obviously, if you look at winter versus summer prices or hourly prices, there's a high degree of variation. So for simplicity, we're just averaging it all into kind of one rate so that we can compare, the May draft budget to the June draft budget for simplicity. So the first bar chart there is our current sort of value proposition, 5% discount relative to PG&E, and I should also note this is Bright Choice focused, not Renewable 100. So for Bright Choice, current value proposition of 5% discount for 2024, you can see that in the first bar chart. That's sort of our current operating status. We did show AVA at a 7% discount, which was what we previously budgeted. Obviously, the difference is fairly modest there. We're just talking about a 5% versus 7% discount. The real changes are on those left two bar charts. So in the May budget, we presented a 7% discount to PG&E, and you can see at that stage what the forecasted rates and PCI were. PCI being almost negligible, and rates higher at close to 14 cents per kilowatt hour. Now in the June budget, what we're showing is that rightmost bar chart. Rates have gone down significantly. That's good news. PCI has gone up though, however. And again, that is just a reflection of when energy prices are soft, PCI goes up. When energy prices are high, PCI goes down, right? Because it's an exit fee that sort of neutralizes that impact for PG&E. The net impact you can see is a reduction of overall cost to customers to around 13 cents or so. So it's going up from about 14 cents to a little over 12, close to 13 cents.
And this was some last minute change that PG&E had to incorporate or discover?
Why did this happen? So this is part of this, as I noted on the ERA filing process, standard for them to go file updates on rate forecast twice a year in May and at the end of the year. So that's standard practice. The May filing reflected basically softer energy prices January and April of 2024.
Cost.
Yeah, cost, exactly.
Procurement costs.
So it's not nothing to do with any kind of implied agreement that they felt they had once this fixed charge that was passed kicks in.
Absolutely, yeah, correct. Unrelated to that. This is a reflection of, and it's not even a significant change in forecasted costs for 2025. They've softened a little bit on certain energy products, but it's not a meaningful change there. So you'll see our expenses actually maintain about the same level. The real driver is because in 2024, energy prices between January and April are a lot softer than they forecasted previously. And when I say previously, we're talking about the sort of November timeframe of 2023.
And you're saying snowpack and some other factors. What about weather and all of that?
All of that plays into it in terms of the January to April softer prices. It was a mild winter. That was a big factor. It wasn't extremely cold here, but also there's dynamics nationwide. It was not as cold on the East Coast and other areas.
For natural gas
So
prices.
therefore, natural gas prices are historically low levels. And so that's a big factor that drives all of this. And so that sort of lower energy prices than what was previously forecasted means that PG&E and we, really all load services, generally over collected in this period as to, as it relates to what it actually costs to serve your customers. And so that over collection leads to a lower rates in 2025 to balance that. It's not necessarily a reflection of 2025 rates being forecasted at lower levels.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt if I may, but demand, hotter summers, right? More extreme temperature summers. So that concept is factored in when they're forecasting out already.
Absolutely, exactly. And I mean, we take a view on what summer prices will be both in 2024, and that accounted for how 2024 rates were set, and as these 2025 rates account for a generally higher priced summer. Summer usually has higher prices, and winter typically has higher prices,
Yep.
and then the spring and the fall typically are mild prices, and then we'll see how things actualize. Yeah, and some of that we get the benefit of, and so you'll see in our current fiscal year, we are generally overperforming relative to what we had forecasted, but some of that isn't fully actualized because we put on hedges. So just because you have softer energy prices doesn't mean it's, our energy prices significantly decrease across the board. So that's the big update there, and we'll talk about some of the some of the changes in the recommendation in a little more detail. Adrian, I'm going to ask you to jump to slide 8. I think that's a better ordering rather than jumping to slide 6, and then we'll go back to slide 6 after that. So slide 8 really just summarizes the overall sort of budget forecast and the update relative to May and the current fiscal year. So if we look at the table, we've got the June update here in yellow. The column to the right is what we had previously presented in May, and then fiscal 24, of course, is there for comparison as well. So you can see the significant change between June and May. That's really driven by electricity sales. So that very first number in that chart going from about $979 million in the May draft budget to $882 million in the current draft budget. Significant drop, entirely a reflection of those lower rates, and everything sort of trickles down. You can see in the cost of energy line there, generally maintained, is actually increased slightly. I'll just note that the change, the forecast in 2025, as I noted, is not significantly different. Brown power energy prices, sort of unspecified energy prices, have actually softened a little bit, but renewable energy is actually continues to increase and get some of that upward pressure. I do note that it's not a material change in our forecasted cost of energy, but it is important to appreciate that dynamic where we have higher renewables procurement than, say, PG&E, get squeezed more in based off of those types of dynamics. And then if you just go to the very last line item, that's our total net revenues, our net position, and our forecast budget surplus. So decreasing significantly from $139 million to $42 million. And that incorporates already the kind of the recommendations that we're making in terms of the value proposition and the on-bill credits. So even doing those things, we're getting to that $42 million. That's still a good, strong number. It's just certainly not as strong as $139 million or our current fiscal year at $180 million. And I will note, in our current fiscal year, we are expecting our net position to be higher than $180 million. Right now, the forecast is $190 to $200 million. And again, that's a reflection of softer energy prices this calendar year, meaning that obviously the budget surplus is higher for this fiscal year. And that'll play into a little bit of the recommendations here that we'll talk through in more detail. So Adrian, if you can go back to slide 6 now.
Could I just,
Yeah.
Sorry, Adrian, before you do. So Howard, just a real quick question here. So obviously $100 million off of the revenues, but an increase in obviously cost of energy. So we're actually, both ways are getting us a bit for the net.
Yeah, I mean, the cost of energy is increasing from 753 to 760. So that's a fairly modest increase.
But just in 1 month, we've estimated that update. Like, that's what I'm trying to understand, right?
Yeah,
So-
between May and June, we've updated the forecast to reflect a modest, 1% increase in our energy costs. That just continues to be a little bit of continued upward pressure on renewable energy pricing and such.
Okay, so it begs the question to me of, okay, so we're in, 1 month of additional knowledge has increased our cost of sales or cost of energy $7 million, right? An additional month of knowledge, is it gonna keep moving, or do we think we've now accommodated that cost?
I have no reason to believe that this is a trend that will just continue. We can't predict exactly where energy prices will go, so I wouldn't necessarily assume, oh, another month is just gonna tick up. In fact, on some energy products, a few months went by from January to April and they went down, in fact, right? So if you look at unspecified power forecast for 2025, they've actually softened a little bit.
Okay.
Renewable energy, that budget increase is mostly because renewable energy prices continue to go up, so REC costs continue to go up a little bit. Yeah, but it certainly could come down. We could see some more projects coming online in 2024. That could happen in 2025. So I wouldn't necessarily say my expectation is that's just going to continue to go up. I think what we're seeing is some volatility in the market.
Yeah,
and
but
that's the latest volatility then.
let me rephrase, right? So, I get we're doing an annual budget. I understand that, but to see, I understand why revenue was changing. So I wasn't expecting to see cost of energy changing as much as 7 million, although it's only 1%. So I guess maybe it's modest, but, yeah, that's, I mean, what's our confidence interval that our budget is going to turn out at $42 million when that's a lot closer or much more significant, obviously by revenues, right?
Yeah.
So I think staff is saying they're confident in what they're presenting now with the updated June, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that is our latest forecast. I would consider that a modest increase in energy costs, even though $7 million certainly does not sound like very modest, but when you compare it to the overall budget, it is a relatively small percentage. But I certainly think it's important to highlight, there is quite a bit of variability that will happen, things always actualize a little differently, in terms of where energy costs are, in terms of what energy use will be. And a lot of that is based off of temperature. Yeah. And so this is a very reasonable forecast, but I would also note that I would expect it to be something different from this in terms of what it actualizes at. And we're accounting for that risk, and that's why we have significant working capital to manage that. Certainly that's why we have reserves in a more risky scenario, but this is, under kind of normal conditions that we expect there variability. Okay. Yeah. Adrian, now back to slide 6, please. So I'm going to touch on some of the, kind of meaningful changes that we just spoke about. So, the Carafera on-bill credit, in our current fiscal year, we had provided a $50 on-bill credit that went out in the fall timeframe. In May, we had proposed to continue with that for the next fiscal year at a $50 bill credit again. Due to the changes here, we are recommending removing that. And what we're showing here is sort of net impact to Carafera customers as a result of rates going down. And so the bar chart to the right shows that illustratively, and a couple of those bullets to the top left quantify that. So for care customers, we're seeing as a result of the rate reduction for the fiscal year that they are seeing their annual costs go down by about $31.50, and for Farah customers, $37.90. So while we're moving that $50 bill credit, those levels are approaching $50, getting there. So that's one factor. And then the other one, of course, looking to sort of the bullets on that bottom left side, is that our current fiscal year, about to wrap up here in June of 2024, is forecasted to be strong, stronger than what we even budgeted it at, approaching kind of that $200 million level, will lead to a fairly significant surplus. And as the board has approved, 60% of that surplus will go to on-bill credits and 40% will go to the solar and storage incentive. That current amount is forecasted at $34 million to go to on-bill credits. There's not explicit, I think, approval on how to split that $34 million amongst our different customers, though I know there was commentary on there being a significant weighting towards Carafera customers. So we don't have a proposal there at this time, but certainly anticipate bringing that forward to the board in the future once those numbers actualize on how to split that. But to sort of quantify that for you, $3.3 million equates to about a $25 bill credit to Carafera. So there is opportunity to provide a very significant bill credit for Care Fair customers, and of course, a meaningful on-bill credit for other customers as well with what we're forecasting there. So between that and the general rate reduction for those customers, we felt it prudent to remove the $50 on-bill credit. You can go to the next slide. This slide, I would say the other slides following this are really the same slides that we have presented, with, of course, incorporating the changes that we've already talked about. So I won't spend too much time on this stuff. Let's jump to slide 9, Adrian. And on slide 9, we talk about the updates on the reserve forecast and then the proposed waterfall. As already noted, we are forecasting a net position budget surplus of $42 million. And you can see that the chart on the top right sort of shows if you contribute that $42 million, what does that mean in terms of a percentage of our annual operating expenses? So with our current fiscal year, the 23 to 24 line item, we are anticipating contributing the $100 million, which is what was in the budget. That will get us to about close to 41% on our percent of annual operating expenditures. With the next fiscal year, with our forecast at $42 million, if we contribute that fully to reserves, that will actually reduce our percentage, and that is a reflection of adding Stockton Olathe, of course, significant increase to annual operating expenses at over $1 billion. So we're going to be around 36%, assuming we are able to fully allocate that amount to reserves. So the recommendation here in terms of the surplus allocation and the waterfall is no allocation to working capital. That is what we presented in May as well. Allocating the first $50 million to reserves. We had previously recommended $100 million. Obviously, we are quite shy of that in terms of the forecast. So we're reducing that from $100 million to $50 million. Assuming we are able to exceed $50 million, which would reflect certainly overperforming from what we're currently forecasted at, we would then propose an allocation of a $25 on-bill credit to Care Fair customers. As we noted, that's estimated at about $3.3 million. If we then further exceed that budget surplus, and so that would be $50 million plus the $53.3 million, then there would be a waterfall that would go to the same kind of waterfall that we currently have, which is 60% towards on-bill credits, 40% towards the NBT, the net billing tariff, or AKA the solar and storage incentive. That would amount to $10 million going to that incentive program and $15 million going to customers via an on-bill credit, and totaling $25 million. If we then further exceed that still, then we would recommend flipping back to allocating towards reserve funds. I don't necessarily anticipate that we'll have significant funds to run through all of this waterfall, but certainly want to set up a process that allows for that, given the general variability of volatility that we're seeing in the market. So that's the probably last meaningful change in this budget that I'll really talk through. All of the slides following this are the same slides. Of course, they reflect the latest in terms of this forecast, but in terms of operating expenditures, energy costs, the carbon-free procurement schedule, overhead expenses, there are no significant meaningful changes on that. In most cases, they're fully unchanged. So I will pause here unless the board would like me to cover that. I feel like it may be better used time to discuss the meeting changes.
Thank you, Howard. Are there any questions from members of the executive committee?
I have a clarifying question, please, Chair.
Go for it.
Thank you. So with respect to closely tracking our revenues and expenses for purchasing energy, the Budget and Finance Committee, I'm presuming they get updates. So at what point will we know if there has been a change in the surplus and whether or not we're going to be able to implement this waterfall? When are those touch points occurring?
Are you asking for our current fiscal year or for next fiscal year?
For next fiscal year.
Got it. So for our Finance, Administrative, and Procurement Subcommittee, we meet every 2 months. And so generally speaking, we provide updates. Certainly we provide our quarterly financials and review those. And we also provide that to the board. We usually do that in consent. But we'll review our financials and any meaningful changes in that committee. which includes, as we did this past year, we brought forward the budget surplus approval of that 60-40 split. We brought that to FAP, I believe that was in January, and then we brought it to the full board, of course. That was for action. In this case, if there's no meaningful action, but we're just reviewing the update, we'll do that. We have the opportunity to do that in any of those subcommittee meetings.
Okay, and when is that next meeting scheduled for the FAB committee?
I believe it's July, early July would be the next meeting. So we do not have another meeting with that subcommittee prior to this anticipated budget.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Member Marquez?
No, thank you.
Any other members in the room? Great, then we will go to public comment. Do we have any public comment in the room? Go for it.
Yeah, I had a question. One of the things that we had been asking for is an increase in opportunities for smaller community-based organizations to apply for grants. And we had asked that there be $50,000 grants offered for smaller community-based organizations for 3-year commitment. And so I would like to see that also be included specifically in the community innovation grants section. And that is because organizations are at different stages in the work that they do. And specifically around the resilience hubs, that was pretty much clarified by organizations. And so there is a need for accessible grants. And especially for organizations that are working towards solar and storage readiness. And so we do need to be offering grants like that to help organizations get to that point. In addition, there should be some monies that actually help community-based organizations with more creative ways of addressing energy needs. Be it Resilience Hub and other efforts in the community. So I wanted to uplift that. And I do think that this agency really needs to consider more of an ongoing debt relief program. There was a great program that was instituted back in 2001 and then never again. And I think one of the things that needs to be made clear is these kinds of programs need to be ongoing. They're not one-offs. These are needs in the community that reach people that have been pretty much left out of the clean energy economy and are living in ongoing energy debt burden. So I wanted to uplift that as well. That's it.
Thank you for your comment. Others in the room?
I also have public comment that I'd like to give. Yeah, okay. So one of the asks that LCEA has been uplifting recently has been expanding the amount of funding going towards resilience hubs. We know there is allocation for solar and storage, but in understanding the needs of resilience hubs in the Bay Area, solar and storage does not cover the needs that a lot of community-based organizations have. There are a lot of efforts toward climate resilience in neighborhoods and communities that these places serve beyond solar and storage, whether that's disaster relief, whether that's offering solar charging during times of power outages and wildfires, cooling centers, etc. So these resilience hubs not only serve energy needs, but they also serve climate needs as well. And so we would like to uplift the need for beyond solar and storage to offer more open-ended funding for these resilience hubs. Another thing related to the budget that I wanted to uplift is that in the last board meeting, the board recognized the need for a study session in these, for a study session to understand what a resilience hub is. And the hope and the optimism that I have is that this, in understanding what a resilience hub is, the board will recognize the funding needs for these resilience hubs. But also as well, in order to understand those needs, CBOs and resilience hubs that have already been doing this work for years need to be at the table. And AVA would be doing themselves a disservice if they don't have that communication with the community directly. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Do you have any comments online?
Yes, we have one hand raised. Carla Yoro, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Hello, everyone. I'm Carly Yoro with Emerald Cities Collaborative, and I'm based in Oakland. And I wanted to reiterate the previous comments and support that, highlighting the importance of holding a public learning session on resilience hubs that is incredibly effective, informational, and equitable to inform the implementation of resilience funding is very critical. I recommend learning from existing community climate resilience hubs in the AVA community energy territory, partnering with CBOs, the City of Oakland, the City of San Leandro, who've been actively working on supporting community climate resilience hubs for the past few years now, and also learning from others that have tackled this issue beyond just solar and storage, but from a holistic community perspective, including Silicon Valley Clean Energy, for example, relying on their resilience framework that goes beyond solar and storage, and also supporting communities from a community welfare perspective as well. A lot of their resilience framework was actually community defined and informed, and I highly recommend a similar process. There's also amazing examples of grant programs that focus on community resilience in the marine clean energy territory, where they've invested in hubs that focus on community kitchens to address food security or food insecurity, and have partnered with the Marin Foundation to do so. So in general, I highly recommend AVA think more creatively and broadly about working with community members, city partners, and learning from other CCAs about how to invest in building out a resilience program that is designed with and for the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further public comment online?
There are no further hands raised at this time.
I will bring it back to the board for any comments or further questions. This is an informational item, and I assume we'll be going to the board at our next meeting. Is that correct?
That is right, in 1 week.
In 1 week. Yes. Also good to note here and at the end that our next meeting of the full board will be in 1 week to approve our budget. Please.
The plan was to hire some more people over the next year, and you're saying that's not changed.
That is correct.
Okay, and so how many positions approximately, you think?
15.
15 new positions?
Correct.
Okay, wow. And so that's what these are?
That is correct. Yep. That's
Okay.
That has that's unchanged from the May presentation.
Okay. All right. For the merrier. Right. Okay.
Any further comments or questions?
Yes.
Member Marquez.
Thank you so much, Chair. So I apologize. I was unable to participate in the meeting in May. And it is on my to-do list to go back and watch the video, because I think that's the best way. Minutes don't always capture everything. So just a couple clarifying questions with respect to bringing back a work session item for everyone to have a better understanding of resiliency hubs. Was there a commitment to bring that back a date certain? Can anyone speak to that? And then I will also just flag, this is just commentary, but an observation I have is the majority did change last January, and we keep on getting different community requests. But what I would like us to see, I know we obviously need to onboard our new CEO. This has been a year and a half of a lot of change and moving parts and bringing new board members up to speed. But what I'm hopeful with is once we do have our new CEO, that we consider having like a strategic plan, a retreat with the board members to identify what are our priorities. It's not that we don't want to be responsive to the public. It's just, this has been a year of like just getting everybody up to speed. So I just wanted to make that comment, let the public know that you are being heard. But you know, we're trying to stabilize things and have clarity in terms of the direction of where AVA is going. So that has been my focus and commitment in this last year, but would really like to see the entire board come together and think about the next steps and what are the initiatives we would like to work on. So if someone could please just respond to whether or not there was a commitment with respect to the work session item.
Yeah, I can speak to that. There's not a date certain commitment, but with that said, I'll just note, we've done some preliminary outreach with both the CAC and LCEA to better define and understand what are the needs of various resilience hubs, of which there are kind of different models that we've seen throughout the nation. And we specifically have 2 grants that we've talked about. One is to help further define that formally and really engage with external third parties to define, inform, and present some case studies specific to resilience hubs and the different natures and services that they provide. And then there's a technical assistance related RFP grant that we have as well. So those 2 components I think are critical in better, sort of defining it, the various needs and what the goals and priorities are for resilience hubs as a whole. And once we issue that, which we anticipate to be in the coming months, we'll obviously gather the findings and anticipate presenting that to the board.
If I can as well, for Member Marquez, it's my understanding as well, I think Member Calb actually is the one that initiated it, that the budget as outlined allocates notable dollars towards resilience hubs, but the nuance is how do we gain the knowledge as an organization to do it? It's kind of what I think the board has heard. I'll maybe be able to speak for the board, I guess, as chair, but so the board is trying to understand what that means to meet the community's requests, which we hear. And I think Member Cal wisely said we need a training session or knowledge base to do it, both through the CAC and the full board. So I think that this budget is providing the dollars to do that, is what I'm confirming with staff.
Yeah, and actually this current fiscal year budget also has dollars.
Some dollars,
actually,
but there's
some of the grant work to actually define and
Right.
put forward case studies. And I think that is the basis of the information, in addition to some of the information gathering we've already done to help, present that to the board, and as well as, have a working group session.
So while I don't think there was a date specific, I do believe it was, I'll say expectation, it's in second half of 24 that we're taking this on and maybe it folds into a strategic plan as well. I think we'd have to ask the full board for that, but I think that concept works for me, so.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So efforts are being made is basically what I'm hearing from staff. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Can I just continue from that? We have like, what do we call them? Technical advisory group, staff from each city. You guys once in a while. Unipals. What are they called?
Pals.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. So
Friendlier nomenclature.
some of them, I would imagine some of them are, to the extent that those cities have or are working on resiliency hubs, those staff might be key people to interact with, and so they're a good resource for this, and maybe even part of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I know we've engaged with them in various ways. We've engaged with them in regards to how to, scope the RFP itself and everything. And so, certainly anticipate further follow-up with them.
And certainly working with all the cities on the critical municipal facility resilience hubs. Yes. Which there's about 60 in that portfolio.
But then we're also expanding to look at medical facilities or other community.
Non-municipal buildings.
Yeah, non-municipal. That was the thing where it sounds like
Correct.
we're trying to make sure we understand that and the complications of who owns the building and how we can find a path forward to do that.
And just the range of definitions of
What
resilience, climate resilience hubs, or we might call them, they could mean a whole range of things. And AVA's role may be a part of that, but they're still part of a bigger defined thing that we should be supportive of and not kind of, yeah, anyway, all right, all good, all right. Yeah, but I hope this happens, this year soon, early fall or whatever.
Yeah, Heidi just said that the RFP, hopefully is going out this month. We're just waiting for an external technical consultant to complete their review.
Great.
I'll just make a note to staff is that Stop Waste obviously has its MuniPal equivalent, a little older in just organizational start date, right? So, learning from what other, they're much smaller, but similar organizations do and what barriers or successes they have. Let's not try to recreate the wheel. Let's try to, learn from past experience. So I'll just recommend that occurs.
And I'll just note that the grant really is to better define and understand what those examples are, the case studies, what others have done to that very point. We're not trying to do this from scratch or anything. We really want to understand what those needs are and how it's been done successfully in other circumstances, learn from that, and then think about how do you best apply that towards the programs that we currently have, or if there's any adjustment on those programs, so we want to make sure that's well informed.
Yeah, I'll just also say, I don't want to create a big government organization. I want to actually get the dollars in the community, right? So how we balance that is important. Yeah, okay. Hopefully that fully answers your comment, Member Marquez. Okay.
It does. Thank you so much. And can I ask, and this is like an ask, and don't want to put more on people, but I just think because this topic keeps on coming up, would it be possible for the board to get like a briefing memo on this, just kind of a timeline, what's in the works, just so we can all have on the ready? Because just wanted to be clear with the public in terms of the efforts that have been made. And obviously I needed a refresher myself. So I really thank you for reminding me of all this critical work that's being done. Thank you.
Happy to summarize, what we've done historically, what our future plans are, to make sure that that's clear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Point out that slide 18 has the local development dollars plan under the budget. Yes.
Great, thank you. Yes, I would certainly concur with my colleagues and agree with Member Marquez's suggestion about doing some strategic planning in the near future. And, as we've talked, as we just discussed, following through on the Resilience Hub discussion and all the work that we're doing there. So appreciate staff's following up on it, and look forward to the study session we have on that soon. With that, we will move, before we move to our next item, Adrian, I know that we are abutting our time limit here in this room. The next meeting doesn't start until 11, correct?
We are all good. I spoke to the next meeting. I'm in the next meeting. This takes precedence, so.
Good, that's what I like to
Delay
hear.
that meeting as necessary.
Then let's move to item 5, which is Renewable 100 updates. And we will try not to delay the next meeting too much.
We'll try to move through this quickly, though. It is a very important update, and my colleagues here all across from me have been actively working on this, and I believe we have some colleagues from Fremont, assuming they've stayed on, that can also comment on their interests specifically. So let's just jump right into things. If you can go to the next slide, Adrian, and slide after this, actually. So some quick background on this topic. Renewable 100 obviously has a lot of interest from the board. We have referenced, largely in the context of the budget, I believe, interest from different cities to opt up to Renewable 100. Currently, we have 8 cities that are on Renewable 100. We have a nice pie chart later in this slide really showing the breakdown there. 1 opted up in 2018, and then 7 since 2022, so more recently. About a third of our load is on R100. That will decrease a little bit as Stockton and Lathrop join, of course, with them joining on Bright Choice, but a meaningful percentage of our load. Fremont and Oakland are the 2 cities, large cities, that are considering community-wide opt-ups for their various customers, both commercial, residential, and municipal as well. Historically, our Renewable 100 pricing has been set looking at the cost differential between R100 and Bright Choice. So looking at renewable energy pricing and costs and looking at the differential there and making sure the value proposition, the discount on the Bright Choice product and the premium of the R100 product are accurately reflected in terms of those procurement costs. As we've seen renewable energy costs increase to historically high levels over the last couple of years, obviously this has a meaningful impact on what that pricing is, and ensuring that we are reviewing with the board the methodology for that that cost allocation, as well as actively speaking to you about the potential implications and risks on what R100 pricing will be in future years as cities are making these decisions. Of course, important that they understand what that cost will be in deciding how to opt up their customers. We anticipate bringing more items. This is just an informational item, but certainly in the July and potentially pushing in the September timeframe for some action on that cost allocation methodology, on R100 pricing, and certainly in approving the opt-up decisions that Fremont and Oakland may bring forward. And there is some interest to try to accelerate that, given that we have August board recess, to not push that into September. I'll note, I know Fremont specifically expressed an interest to move this as quickly as possible, so we may bring this forward in July. Next slide, please. Obviously touching on Fremont and Oakland in a little bit more detail. Significant loads. Currently, Fremont represents 70% of our load, Oakland 25% of our load, so they are 2 of our largest jurisdictions. Again, these percentages are pre-Stockton and Lathrop joining us, so those numbers will go down a little bit, but still remain very high. We've been discussing with Fremont over a year or so, so this has been a long dialogue. Oakland a little shorter than that, but nonetheless very important dialogue as well, of course. We anticipate some meetings coming forward in the coming months with Fremont and Oakland, bringing forward approval items with their city councils on this topic. I believe Fremont is slated for the June 18th meeting, so certainly very, very actively moving.
Same day.
Yes, yes, there we go. So all very timely. We've discussed with both cities some phasing approach in the sort of 25, 26, 27 timeframe, given the significant sizes of their load. And I think there, certainly openness to that, but also an interest in trying to accelerate it as quickly as possible. That's what brings us here today, to make sure that we're both updating them with the right information, as well as our board, and understanding what are some of the different pricing dynamics associated with that type of an opt-out. The current policy that we have approved by the board requires approval of our board by the end of May. That was actually a policy that we brought forward not that long ago, just several months back, if you recall, and that was being very mindful of what it takes to sort of make that decision, incorporate in our budget, and then start procuring that energy. We're beyond that, of course, already as we're sitting in June, but we thought that was prudent given the size of the load, that we continue to have active conversations with Fremont and Oakland. And we felt that it was reasonable to have an exception on this, and assuming that we're having active dialogue with our board, of course, and still managing the procurement needs. So I did want to flag that. This is a little bit out of policy, but I think it's important to have this active dialogue and such. So next slide, Adrian. Thank you. So this just kind of breaks down our current city members and the load. You can see in green, those are the 8 cities that I've briefly touched on that are currently on Renewable 100. And then we have Fremont and Oakland. So you can see how significant that is. And if those 2 cities were to opt up, we'd be close to 75% of our load on Renewable 100. Again, this does not include Stockton and Lathrop, so those numbers would come down. I believe we'd be more like 2/3 Renewable 100 once you add those cities, so still a very significant percentage of our load. Next slide. So a little bit on the cost allocation methodology, and this can get a little bit dense and complex, so I'll keep it at a somewhat high level. But historically, PCC1 prices have been fairly stable in that $10 to $15 range. And as we've noted a few times, that there's been volatility and a lot of upward pressure on that pricing. We're currently seeing it more like the $70 to $80 range, at least on a spot market basis, so very short-term procurements. When it's been at the $10 to $15 range, when you look at that and you look at sort of long-term PPAs that we put in place for new solar projects, and you're doing short-term procurements, and you're doing 3-year contracts and 5-year contracts and all that stuff, there's not that much variation in what the renewable energy costs are. And so historically, we've priced the renewable energy costs between Bright Choice and Renewable 100 at the same level. There's been no need to differentiate in those cost allocations. As we look at larger load opting up in the size of what we're talking about here with Fremont and Oakland, and given the market dynamics where renewable energy pricing now has increased so significantly, I think we need to revisit that cost allocation methodology and discuss that with the board from a policy perspective on, do we allocate the marginal cost of renewable energy to Renewable 100 alone? That being a premium product, perhaps with a little bit more customers that are a little bit more sticky, being mindful, having a goal of choosing a cleaner, greener product, and putting that marginal allocation there. Specifically, given that Fremont and Oakland have these decisions, that's a significant amount of load that would inevitably increase renewable energy costs. Does it make sense to apply the marginal cost of that new procurement specifically to Renewable 100 customers? That's likely the recommendation. I'm not bringing forward that recommendation today. I'm just socializing, this is what we're contemplating, these different methodological approaches around, is there one renewable energy price that's applied to all customers, or do you differentiate that allocation of costs to Renewable 100 versus Bright Choice? And there, you can imagine there's quite a bit of complexity if you say, yes, we want to apply marginal cost towards Renewable 100. you have to implement a cost accounting system that then you look at all of your contracts on a going forward basis and say, look, this contract is being signed, it's at this price, this one gets allocated to Renewable 100. And the additional complexity, as you can imagine, is we're not fully procured on all of our renewable energy needs across Bright Choice either. So certainly we've had a schedule for that procurement into future years and our 2030 goal of being 100% clean. So we've been able to anticipate that. We've been able to continue to layer on more contracts and PPAs, and there is still more to procure. So, as every contract goes forward in the future, you have to make a decision that how does this contract get allocated in terms of Bright Choice versus R100 customers? What differentiates in terms of what you were estimating versus what's actualizing? So there's definitely some complexity with that. Setting that aside at a high level conceptual, I think that's something that we're heavily contemplating. A little bit more about the numbers on the following slides there. And I just want to raise this as an issue, and we'll likely bring this forward to the board in the coming months to really talk about cost allocation methodology, because that obviously has significant implications in the pricing for R100 and can have implications for Bright Choice as well, of course. On the next slide, Adrian, just a little bit of numbers to sort of illustrate this. These are indicative numbers, illustrative numbers, certainly backed by sort of what we're seeing in the market, but definitely room for refinement in terms of some of the modeling, as well as continue to verify and check what market pricing is as you look at procuring for such significant loads. So room for change on some of these numbers. But illustratively, currently we have a 5% discount to PG&E. You can envision that if you opt out significant load, have to procure significantly more renewable energy at higher prices, that could increase the current premium that's at a 1/4 cent premium to PG&E to something like 0.75 cents to PG&E. That is a dynamic that we're seeing. That's the type of upward pressure that we're seeing. You can also see that there is a potential as brown power prices actually soften a little bit, and that is what we're seeing in 2025 specifically, that our headroom to operate is squeezed a little bit. Now, generally, that's a good thing. Rates will come lower, so that's a benefit to our customers, of course. But our financial sort of and budget surplus is likely to come down if that is the case. If market prices go down, if brown power prices specifically go down. And in that scenario, there is, it is plausible that our value proposition will come down. We have seen that not long ago, just a few years back, with softer energy prices and lower rates. Our value proposition was in the 1% to 3% range. So just as a quick reminder there. So you could plausibly see our Bright Choice product going down to a 3% discount to PG&E. And R100, if you're going to maintain that cost differential, would then go to something like 1.25 cent premium to PG&E. So these are important numbers to sort of have in our head to think about the cost allocation methodology and to think about kind of where rates are going and what does that mean in terms of implied future risks to our rate setting for R100 and Bright Choice for that matter. Again, these being illustrative. There's certainly, if power prices spike out, which we've seen over the last couple of years, you could see rates going up. That's a bad thing in terms of affordability, but it does improve our financial position, and we would likely respond with increased value proposition and an increased discount. And you could see us actually, bringing Renewable R100 premium down. So it could go either way, of course. Next slide, please. This speaks a little bit more to Fremont. Fremont is looking. We've been discussing with them and citywide opt-up in 2025. That is their interest that they've expressed. We have also talked to them about a phasing approach of residential and commercial getting split. And so you can see a few different scenarios that we've laid out there. We've highlighted Fremont specifically, one, just because we want to illustrate and try to simplify things, but also because our discussions with Oakland, I think they are more open to a longer-term phasing approach, understanding the impacts to pricing. So feel that this is a more urgent topic in the context of Fremont and a good illustrative example here. So the baseline is the top line numbers. We're currently at a 1/4 cent premium to PG&E. If you were to opt up all of Fremont, you could see a scenario where if you opted that all up in 2025, obviously that's significant load all at once. That's where the premium for R100 could go to a little bit more than a 1/2 cent premium of PG&E. If you were to phase that, where resi goes first in 2025 and then commercial in 2026, you can see how you could kind of mute that impact a little bit, where it's more like a 0.34 cent premium to PG&E in 25 and a 0.44 cent premium in 2026. And if you were to flip that, I think the commercial load is a little larger than a resi load, and that's the reason why you would see that it's more like a 0.48 cent premium and a 0.45 cent premium in 2026 respectively. So you can kind of see how the numbers play out a little bit. Again, this is more for illustrative purposes based off of what we're seeing in terms of elevated renewable energy pricing and what it means to phase the opt-up. I do want to highlight for this budget cycle, the reason why we haven't proposed any changes to R100 pricing is any decision to opt up obviously is really at the tail end of this next fiscal year. So it doesn't really have a huge impact in the budget that we just presented. This is really talking about going to the fiscal year after that, where there's significant load actually being on Renewable 100 that this plays through. So those are the illustrative numbers. Last slide, Adrian. Next steps. So we do anticipate bringing forward some more combination informational items and action items where we bring forward the cost allocation methodology for approval and potential implications to R100 pricing. The R100 pricing again may not be an action item because we don't anticipate a need to actually change that pricing in the coming months, but rather that's a risk and something that we want to make sure the board is well informed on, as well as our city members, of course. And then a decision to actually approve whatever Fremont and Oakland get approved by their city councils in terms of opting up their customers to Rule 100. That's something that we of course will bring forward for an action item. That could be as late as September. There is some interest in bringing that forward, so it could be July as well. So wanted to flag those. All right, I will stop there for questions.
Great, thank you very much. I will first go to executive board members for any questions.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Member Marquez.
Thank you. Can you go back to, I believe it was slide 8? Just want to make sure that the costing is including municipal buildings as well when you say all Fremont?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Just wanted to be clear. Okay,
Oh, it is.
perfect.
The clarification is Fremont Municipal is already on Renewable 100.
Oh, they already are on. Got it. So this is just residential commercial. Okay, thank you.
Other questions from board members?
Yeah, maybe I ask about the cost allocation method, right? So in the Bright Choice package that we're offering, based on the content label, right, there's some part that's clean already, right? Is any element of that some of those long-term renewable contracts that we're doing, like do those bring down or reach into large hydro or something like that? Does that reach in and provide the basket of goods for Bright Choice?
All of our long-term contracts are in our costs already for Bright Choice and Renewable 100. And historically, obviously, Renewable 100 doesn't have any large hydro. That's right. So all of the renewable energy specifically is incorporated in that pricing for the budget year in terms of what we're looking out for. We've been procuring, obviously, layering in various PPAs with sort of our procurement targets in mind. Those targets haven't included other cities opting up. Certainly, we are aware of there's generally interest not just by Fremont, Oakland, but others as well. So, of course, we've anticipated increased need, but until we know that is approved or on the horizon, we've been procuring the current sort of customer mix on certain products.
So the question is, I guess maybe the question I think being asked of the board is, would you allocate some of the marginal costs until the long-term contracts can take place? Would you allocate some of those marginal costs to Bright Choice, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know offhand, but the concept that I'm trying to understand is, well, if there's a renewable long-term contracts that both provide the renewable basket of good mix, right? But also the Bright Choice, some element or component of it, right? Then I do see a basis to have Bright Choice also carry some of the cost burden, I guess I'll say. But how much? I would say we probably would want to do some math around how much of the basket of goods of Bright Choice is from those renewable long-term contracts or marginal increase, right? Because they're part of that. They're still offering some element of it, right? So maybe there's, a third is, I'll call it for lack of, carbon polluting dirty, and 2/3 is maybe a third's carbon free but not renewable, and maybe a third is renewable all the way, right? Carbon free renewable. So yeah, I see Bright Choice possibly in helping to change, because I guess on the premise, there's the premise that we're trying to move everyone to renewable 100, right? So, you know, Bright Choice doesn't get us. It's a draft position, I guess I'll say for me, but you know, Bright Choice has to help carry the load to achieve the goals, so.
And I'll just note, there's, you know, obviously there's different gradients of how you apply that marginal cost.
Right.
And at least as a baseline, we have an anticipated schedule for what we need to prepare for Bright Choice, and not everything is fully procured, of course, going out to 5-10 years. And so both products have more to procure, and therefore both products should get some of that marginal cost. Of course, we're not suggesting just all the expensive costs go to 100, but it would be a smaller share because, you know, we generally cost average out procurement over time. So we knew the Bright Choice anticipated need, and there's some open position. So I think that the idea we have in mind is that you would take these higher cost renewables, the marginal costs, and certainly they would get some share of that. So not suggesting no share of that, but you could give them more of a share, less of a share, and say blend all of that in fully. But I just want to be clear about that. Of course, there's still some open position with our Bright Choice procurement plans, and not suggesting they would just get all the legacy contracts that are all, you know, really, really in the money hedges and things like that.
Yeah.
But that is a scenario, and that is a scenario we'll probably present just so we at least we can see the different scenarios in terms of methodology types.
Yeah, so if I may, between comments and questions, but through the chair, so I could foresee baseline suggestion by staff possibly being, okay, whatever the marginal cost for renewable 100 procurement is being allocated, you know, 80% or 70% based on the load to renewable 100's cost structure, but also, you know, a portion going to Bright Choice because Bright Choice is receiving some of that renewable 100 long-term and marginal cost contracts because it's offering some of it in its portfolio mix. And then that's kind of like your baseline. And then whether you allocate more or less cost would be based upon more judgment by the board and the staff as to, you know, incentive based, you know, why do we tax smoking and cigarettes, right? So I could see us doing something like that. Okay, so that's where I'm at for comments and we'll go from there. Oh, and it's Nick chatting with us.
I think maybe on something else.
Okay.
That's awkward.
Member Cobb, any questions?
No, just Oakland is agreeing to do the Mistral counts and to give our city administrator the authority to opt down every couple of years for fiscal, if we have an extreme fiscal challenge. And then we are going to come back in the fall to discuss residential and commercial accounts, phasing those in for 26, 27, hopefully making a decision this year to do that.
Right. Yeah. With that, we will go to public comment. Do you have any members of the public in the room who wish to speak on this item? Please go ahead.
Yes, we do. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Jessica Tovar with Local Clean Energy Alliance. This is why I brought up there's a need for a debt relief program or a disconnection prevention program, is because about 30% of residential households that are actually eligible for CARE and FARA programs are not necessarily enrolled. Therefore, they're being forced to pay for premium price energy under Renewable 100 if you opt them up without their knowledge. And then that also makes a case for that CARE and FARA bill credit that's issued annually, not actually reaching the people that need it. So having a debt relief program would be really important, and it should be an ongoing annual program, similar to the one that was executed in 2021, where grants were administered to different community-based organizations to increase and facilitate the enrollment of CARE, FARA, AMP, and LIHEAP programs. And oftentimes what we've learned is, there's a language access barrier. There's also a literacy barrier, like having to fill out forms is difficult for some people. And then the other thing is that, you know, we've talked a lot about resilience hubs. Resilience hubs could be facilitating this program at the same time, and actually providing grants to Spectrum Services, who administers the LIHEAP program, because when people are behind on their bill, they help bring them current to prevent them from being disconnected. And the advantage for community choice preventing disconnections is actually every time somebody's behind on their bill and they're about to be disconnected, you actually lose that customer to PG&E because they get sent back to the investor-owned utility. So one of the things, there's a lot of issues, just so I want to also address, is that auto enrollment for community choice was actually designed for the success of community choice, not to actually make decisions for households on how much they pay. And then when you actually prompt people to opt, I know there's the opt down option, but people don't know that, and then they could potentially opt out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have other comments in the room?
Oh. One more public.
I think he's doing room first.
Room
and then
first,
we'll
okay.
virtual.
Seeing none? Online?
Jim Lutz, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Unmute myself. Jim Lutz. I'm a member of the Community Advisory Committee, but right now I'm speaking for myself. And I'm glad to see AVA is looking seriously at helping cities, even more cities, default to 100% renewable. And it would be very helpful to make the process easier for the cities, especially the ones like Oakland with significant low-income populations, if the renewable 100% was cheaper than PG&E's base rate. And I know Howard says our costs are about the same as PG&E's, but it'd be good to look at that again. And then a couple other items. I would like to suggest a 100% local renewable rate with a higher premium, where all the generation and storage would be within AVA territory. And this would be for AVA customers who are able to afford a higher rate, could help accelerate the local development. And then further ahead, but hopefully, again, not too far off, we need to start thinking about renewable energy that's 24/7, 365 renewable. And there's a white paper by Peninsula Clean Energy where they're starting to look at that. And they're just across the bay, so we should be talking to them on how to make it 24/7, 365. So it's hourly renewable, which I think has to be displayed in 2028 anyways. So thank you.
Thank you. There are no further hands raised at this time.
Thank you. Howard, I recall that in our last board meeting, we touched on the uncollectibles and disconnects. Can you speak to that? I'm vaguely remembering that last board meeting, we said that we essentially are not doing any disconnections and have a lot of uncollectibles that we're, just write off. Can you?
Yeah, so different, somewhat different topics. There's on the uncollectibles, right? We've recently entered the write-off policy for aged uncollectibles and a process to pursue some uncollectibles. On the disconnections, we actually don't directly control that. So that's a PG&E action if they need to disconnect, and we actually don't, we never disconnect customers. And feel free to elaborate on that if.
Yeah, and when a customer, just a quick point of clarification, when a customer is disconnected due to aged debt by PG&E, they are able to come back. They don't actually go to PG&E service for generation. When they reopen their account, they would come back to AVA.
I'll also just add that even for customers who are behind on their AVA payments, we have never sort of sent them back to PG&E.
No, we don't send them back.
We've been trying to address it in other ways.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments from board members?
Is staff asking for feedback with respect to whether or not we support making the modification in our policy to bring on Fremont quicker than the proposed timeline?
This is not an action item, so we wanted to introduce this and provide the full context of what discussions are with Fremont currently and what they're anticipating wanting to do. I think we will bring forward action in the future. Certainly, we welcome any informal feedback, I suppose you could say, on guiding this process from both a cost methodology perspective. Also guidance, I suppose, on to the extent Fremont had interest in opting up all customers in 2025, but this is an impact to all R100 customers currently and perhaps future R100 customers. So, you know, an approach to saying we really must phase versus will strongly encourage phasing, that, you know, that would inform how we continue to work with Fremont on this topic. We certainly don't want to be in a position to say you cannot opt up your customers, but we also want to appreciate that it has impacts to other cities. And so to the extent cities have opinions and want to, you know, put some place some guardrails or, you know, guidelines on how that is done and requiring a phased opt up, you know, that's something that we want to be aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments from members? I'll just say, I think always good to be aware of trying to make people aware of the new change once we do opt them up. When Albany went through our opt up to Renewable 100, we had a lot of people opt back down, which I considered a success because it meant they knew what was happening. They engaged with Ava, they stuck on Ava, they just wanted to go back to right choice. So as much as we can keep that engagement and make sure that people have that choice and, you know, inform them about it, that's one of our top goals. With that, I think that's the end of this item. Thank you very much for the presentation. We will now move to item 6, which is committee member and staff announcements, including request to place items on future agenda items. Any requests for future agenda items or announcements from members?
I'll just say that once we get a little further, you know, a strategic plan or something like that, you know, and where we're going with that, but I think we need to get a little bit further down the road. And the Resilient Hub informational item.
Yep. Agree with both of those. With that, I believe that takes us to our adjournment because we did our closed session earlier. So thank you to all the staff who joined us and all the members and public, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Here, you gotta take this.
Yeah, I have
I
a
never
question
do
for
that.
both of you. Adrian, should I, what you just said was
That's
new
hard.
information.